Check it out. Ricky Nelson. This is Ricky Nelson's second solo album, released in July of 1958. It was released when he was a bona fide teen idol. Look at that face. Look at that kid, eh? This record went to number 7 on the Billboard album chart. The cover, pretty standard 50s cover. The headshot with the typeface, kind of hip typeface, as you can see, a little uneven to sort of make it look a little youthful, rebellious. You have the logo up in the corner there for Imperial Records, the high fidelity, the serial number. Now, Imperial Records, they were a record label that was formed in 1947. They started as a country and an R&B label. Ricky Nelson and Fats Domino were their two biggest rock and roll acts, and Ricky Nelson stayed with Imperial Records until 1963 when he switched to Decca Records. Imperial Records, by the way, they lasted until about 1970, and then nowadays the Imperial catalog is owned by Universal Music. This is an original pressing, and you can tell by the label. The Imperial Records label with the stars, the colorful stars, looks like they're bursting out of the center. Later, the Imperial label, have an example of that here. You can also tell it's a 50s record. It's a little bit thicker. Back in those days, the records were a little bit thicker. And this record was printed at the RCA Records pressing plant in Indianapolis, Indiana. You can see there's a number, IX101 for side 1, and then on side 2, IX102 there. The I is for Indianapolis. RCA Records had 2 other plants pressing records at the time, one in Rockaway, New Jersey, and the other in Hollywood, California. The Indianapolis one was the biggest of the 3, and that, again, the I indicates it was pressed in Indiana. The cover as well, it's a little rough around the edges, split on the bottom there, and I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's taped together along the side here and the front, so an original copy definitely has seen the years. Plenty of use, and you can see there's the name right there, Empey. That is my mom, Bernice Empey. My name's Empey, and she owned this record when she was even younger than when she was married to my dad. In the top corner of the front, you can see the name Bernice Edwards, and again, that's Mom. Her maiden name was Edwards, and she bought this record when she was 14 years old in 1958. And it was common for people to put their names on their records. You don't want anybody taking your records. So my mom, she did the same. And even on the back, she went so far as to put the address, 2983 Blackwood. That's the house where she lived with her parents, my grandparents, basically until they couldn't anymore. It was a beautiful, grand old house, high on the hill, right in the center of Victoria, British Columbia. And that's when my mom bought this record in 1958. Now, another thing, one of a kind about this record is my mom etched her name into the runout. Here on side 2, you can see Bernice Edwards. And she even got it in between the grooves so it doesn't disrupt the needle. Very cool. And to be honest with you, I didn't discover that until maybe a couple of months ago. My mom has had this record since 1958. I inherited it quite a few years ago, and I didn't know that she etched her name into the record until a couple of months ago. Just something very, very cool to see. You can also see on the label there the initials BE right above it, so even further proof that it's Bernice's record, okay? It's a really good record, too. Stood the test of time. Still plays to this day. It's, a little beaten up, a little worn. It's crackly, but there's no skips, and I can listen to it today just like my mom did over 60 years ago. It's just an awesome time machine. So on the back cover then, you have something that was also pretty familiar for the time, basically a big write-up about the artist. Usually a glowing biography with tales of the artist's success and their skyrocketing career. You can learn a lot from the back of record covers. And then they finish with something also pretty common for the time, to tell you about the technical aspects of the recording, to basically let you know that you're holding high quality, this is the best high fidelity that money can buy. Now, since High-fidelity recording includes a true reproduction of all sounds without discrimination or distortion. The original recording was done on an Ampex 300C magnetic tape recorder at 15 IPS using Scotch tape. To effectively record the full frequency spectrum, Telefunken U47M microphones were used. Tape-to-disc transfer employed an automatic Scully lathe with heated stylus using a Grampian feedback cutter system. Disc recording utilizes the standard RIAA recording curve. And the music is great. It's a great album. Great 50s rock and roll. Very guitar-oriented. James Burton, the guitar player on here, he was a pioneer of rock and roll guitar and guitar solos. He played with a lot of artists throughout the 50s. And then in the late 60s, 1969 actually, James Burton became the leader of Elvis Presley's TCB band. If you see any live footage of Elvis from 1969 until his death, James Burton is the guy with the Paisley Telecaster. On a lot of these songs, some great guitar solos. James Burton just tearing it up on this album. Shirley Lee, I'm Feeling Sorry. Also, there's some good rock and roll standards on here. There's Good Rockin' Tonight, My Babe, I'm in Love Again. Unchained Melody is on here 6 years before the Righteous Brothers made that a big hit. Poor Little Fool, definitely my favorite Ricky Nelson song. This album also features the first song Ricky Nelson ever wrote, Don't Leave Me This Way. So the album itself was recorded at Master Recorders in Los Angeles, which was a pretty popular studio in Los Angeles in the mid to the late 1950s. And the album was recorded in 4 days. That's right, they recorded this album in 4 days in April of 1958. So in those days too, that's how you had to do it, because bands basically played in one room. There wasn't a lot of tracks in the recording studio, so you had to get it right. If somebody messed up, it ruined the whole take. And Ricky's voice just sounds great. It's got that 50s reverb, that echo on here. Just a good 50s rock and roll album. And a great way to literally start a record collection with Ricky Nelson.